Hi, my name is Travis Laudermilk, and my project was on HTML and web fundamentals. So a description of the project was that it was essentially an interactive e-learning course serviced up through the web. It included an instructional video describing to learners how the web works, and then it was followed up with a text-based instruction describing the basics of HTML syntax. The course provided a pre and post test before and after the instruction in order to measure the effectiveness of the overall course. The learning objectives broke up into two major sections. First, I wanted to teach learners about the web and how it works. How does a web page make a request and how does it get returned back? And then I wanted to teach them the basics of HTML syntax. So open and close tags and basic instruction like body, header, footer, how to create a hyperlink and an image tag, how to style your code by providing text color, width, height, and that sort of thing. And then on the final quiz, I presented a coding challenge. So it was a real-world project where learners had to type up the appropriate code in response to the problem. So early on in my designs, I knew in order to keep the tutorial at a reasonable length, and I was shooting for about 20 minutes, I was going to have to do some sort of video to describe how the web works. So initially, in my initial designs, I figured I was going to do some sort of flash animation. Well, ultimately, I ended up having to do something in Premiere to get the effect that I wanted. But it's about a 2-minute video that describes how the client browser, essentially makes a request. That request goes over the internet and ultimately lands on a server, and then the server responds back with a reply, and ultimately a website is displayed. And then after you finish the video, you then navigate to a series of pages that describe how HTML is constructed to make a web page. So you have the HTML tags, and then you have the body, the header and footer tags, and then the body tags, and it shows how all that stuff is kind of nested to ultimately create what we see on the web. So I utilized a lot of principles that we've learned during the quarter. I used the redundancy principle on the instructional video by not providing transcribed text in addition to audio narration. I used the coherence principle. Again, I was trying to keep this in around 20 minutes, so it was necessary to be concise and direct. So the narration of the video along with the language of the text-based instruction was very carefully considered, and I wrote several drafts to get the kind of message that I wanted across. And I also didn't include any background audio or unnecessary dialogue in the video to keep it, again, very straight and to the point. The video also provides pre-training because it allows learners to understand how the web works and get an understanding of what's happening before they dive into HTML code. And the text-based portion of the course is learner-controlled. They can navigate back and forward. I did provide feedback, I say partially, because I wasn't able to, from a technical standpoint, I wasn't able to figure out how to provide the learners the answers to their pre-test as well as their coding challenge. I was only able to give them feedback on what the right answers were on the multiple choice questions on the post test. The contiguity principle was followed in the sense that it became very clear early on in my designs that I couldn't just show the HTML code, that learners weren't really getting it. So I ended up coming up with this design which shows the code and then ultimately shows you the output of the code. And I found that was pretty effective. And then, of course, the whole course is segmented into logical chunks. So you explore how the web works, and then you ultimately drill down into the specifics of specific elements of HTML, like hyperlinks and image tags. So what we found, and I don't know if anybody else had this problem, but I had a real challenge trying to get people to participate. most of the people that I would go to for this kind of project already are familiar with the web, my colleagues and stuff. So they really couldn't help me in this perspective. So the folks that weren't familiar with the web, as far as HTML, some of them felt it was too intimidating, and I'd hear things like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," or "No, I'll look stupid. I don't want to do it." So I had a hard time convincing them that was the whole point, is that I needed someone that wasn't familiar with it. Um, and so I got 7 people to participate, but only 4 of them actually completed the entire thing with the pre and post test. So that was a bit disappointing. The results of the pre and post tests were emailed to me, so I had those. And of the 4 that actually completed it from beginning to end, I did show that there was a 55% improvement, which was encouraging that I was on the right track. However, no learner was able to complete the coding challenge, the actual portion where I asked them to write code of their own in response to a problem. There was a couple of people actually tried it. They didn't get it right, and a couple of people said, "Yeah, right. I'm not even going to try it." So the question, of course, did we meet our goals? You can see here on the left, these are all the learning objectives that I set out to achieve. In the middle column are the associated questions on the pre and post test. And then, I was able to show that there was improvement demonstrated in most of the goals. The coding challenge was clearly, there was no improvement demonstrated there. The correct styling, that was unlikely. I didn't ask questions about styling on the pre-test, so I couldn't directly compare with the post-test. But the post-test question answers weren't strong enough to give me a feeling that people really understood that concept. So if I had to do this all over again, it was very clear that the whole pre-test, post-test model wasn't working for this. I should have done more self-explanation throughout. So at the end of each segment, I should have provided questions then and asked learners, what they learned from that segment, and really test before they moved on to the next segment. Whether or not they were really getting the material or not. Practice is very necessary for this kind of course. Coding Academy does this really well, where learners are expected to write the code before they can move on to the next concept. I think that would have proved much more valuable instead of confronting them at the end with a coding challenge and saying, "Okay, write code." And I should have probably separated the concepts. Initially, it seemed to make sense to explain how the web works and then teach them HTML, but as I kind of started to do it, I realized that those concepts are actually not all that related. But I had fun with this project, and I learned a lot. So thank you.